The government has released their budget, and it is quite interesting. Tax bracket adjustments are an important part of the National Party's economic agenda. The National Party wants to adjust income tax brackets to address the bracket creep that is caused by inflation. Bracket creep describes a process by which inflation pushes people into higher and higher tax brackets when their real income and spending power is not increasing. Bracket creep is a serious issue, and I do support efforts to address it. Inflation does push people into higher and higher tax brackets, and that is an issue. People are not making more money in any practical sense, but they are paying more tax. That is a problem. Trying to address bracket creep by adjusting tax brackets is a good move. That said, the way National has funded this policy is appalling. Adjusting tax brackets to address bracket creep is economic common sense, but the way National has funded this policy is the furthest possible thing from economic common sense. National is going to borrow more money. Borrowing to fund tax cuts is just bad economic management. There are no two ways around it. It is stupid and comical. We should not be funding tax bracket adjustments with borrowing. The National Party's cuts are also stupid. The way these cuts have been executed is just plain lazy. National has given various government departments targets to meet. National has basically just told the various government departments to make significant spending cuts. This is extremely lazy cost cutting. Smart cost cutting is targeted. Get rid of a few questionable ministries. Start axing specific programs and specific departments. Don't just do across-the-board cuts with the ministries themselves given responsibility for making them. That is lazy and stupid, and it ensures that those cuts will do damage. Targeted, precise cuts do minimal damage. Across-the-board cuts inevitably end up doing damage. If the government is going to cut spending, it has a moral responsibility to do so with caution and precision. If the government is going to cut spending, it has a moral responsibility to do targeted, careful cuts, intended to do minimal damage. Just telling government departments to meet targets and cut spending is lazy and stupid. It is not targeted, it is not precise, it is just an across-the-board cut that will inevitably do damage. Because you cannot do broad cuts without taking out some important services. Cuts need to be cautious and precise, and they have been neither. We should address bracket creep by adjusting tax brackets, but cuts and borrowing are a stupid way of funding such a thing. There is one good way of funding this kind of thing. Redistribute the tax burden. Introduce a capital gains tax or a land tax. The International Monetary Fund has recommended both of these things. Australia has a capital gains tax and has had one since the 1980s. These are not radical policies. These are very normal policies, and they would pay for tax cuts for ordinary people. And they would do so by moving the tax burden towards wealthy people who can easily afford to pay it. Ordinary people face an enormously disproportionate tax burden in terms of the toll that tax takes on their well-being. For wealthy people, the tax burden is the difference between a seventh investment property and a new jet ski. For ordinary people, the tax burden is the difference between living in a warm, dry home or living in a cold, damp flat. Ordinary people bear a disproportionate burden in terms of the well-being cost of taxation. That is to say that taxation takes a greater toll on their well-being. National should have funded their plan by redistributing the tax burden. But they would never do that, because that would increase taxes on the rich people who fund their party. Perhaps the most important tax reform is a tax-free threshold. The Greens have campaigned on this policy. Australia has a tax-free threshold. Such a policy would deliver a tax cut for everyone. It would encourage people to get into work by making initial pay tax-free. It would help students who would face little to no income tax. It would help older people who work a part-time job on the side. It would help low-income people. A tax-free threshold is a great policy. A tax-free threshold paid for by a capital gains tax is an excellent tax reform. New Zealand needs tax reform. The National Party has delivered something, but it was poorly funded and it did not go far enough. New Zealand can do better. New Zealand deserves better.